Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. This has been a big week for cloud security and security in general. Google agreed to pay 32 billion for Wiz, and that's just a wow. When Wiz was launched about 2020, the biggest cybersecurity company back then was just 16 billion. So Google is paying double the valuation of the largest company, just after 5 years. Now, we want to congratulate all of our friends at Wiz, but there's still a lot of questions being opened right now for Google, but then for customers or cloud security industry as such. So we are here to discuss and unpack some of these questions. And let me first of all introduce myself. My name is Sergej. I'm CISO at Sysdig, and we are Kubernetes-born cloud security company, and also the founder of the most adopted open source networking and cloud security tools, Wireshark and Falco. And I'm very happy to be joined by two experts in cloud security and market research. First of all, James Berthoty. James, thank you for being here. And James is a platform and security engineer who turned cloud security analyst and who's also the founder of 𝘯𝘱𝘱𝘕. And James, I love your comprehensive Kubernetes and cloud security content. I think that's the most intensive one out there. And I'm also happy to welcome Matt Stamper. Matt is a three-time CISO advisor and also former research director at Gartner for multiple topics, incident response, cloud security, security compliance. And he has clearly seen all the different angles of security in general. So Matt, thanks for joining us as well. Let's get into the meat, I would say. And we want to discuss all the perspectives, but I'd love us to start with the Google perspective first. So James, what is Google trying to achieve? Are they trying to solve the grand cyber problem of the world? Or is buying a cybersecurity company the new way to acquire customers and data?
Yeah, I think Google, first of all, GCP has always had some incredibly advanced underlying security mechanisms. I think it's clear that they have always had a genuine commitment to security by default and configuration style security that goes beyond what a lot of other cloud providers have done. And I think they also have a genuine commitment to fostering multi-cloud security. Obviously, they are happy to drive GCP adoption via a security on-ramp. But I don't think, I think that vision is like a happy coinciding thing with what they're trying to achieve. I think ultimately there's an idea of what a Wiz first Google Cloud security product looks like. That's going to take a long time to really come to fruition. So I think it's kind of too early to tell exactly what Google's motives are, besides clearly multi-cloud security and having a better competitive security offering from their platform.
Right. Okay. I mean, Matt, from your standpoint, I think being an analyst, what scenario should we really expect from Google, and what impact would it bring also to Google, but also to Wiz and the agility innovation was showed in the past?
I think if you're looking at it, one would hope that the integration would go smoothly, but historically that may not be the case. When you see large integrations between very different companies, very different cultures, potentially different technology stacks, there's a lot of integration risk there that I think the marketplace needs to be aware of. What may have been a priority in Wiz's current operating environment may no longer be a first order priority with respect to Google and its security. So I think a lot of that uncertainty, if you will need to be flushed out as organizations do that. And we've seen some of these examples historically. You look at Verizon when they acquired, I think, ProtectWise, which was kind of a NAC environment. Right. Microsoft with Hexadite in the early SOAR days. Do these things become features in kind of its own platform, or are they still ubiquitously made available to the marketplace? I don't know if we know that yet. So I think it's going to be a bit of a cautious period of time for people that are looking at these platforms.
Right. Yeah, and I guess James?
I think it's I think whichever. If it becomes a Google Cloud presents security powered by Wiz, I think that ultimately doesn't help very much. Yeah. But I think if they actually let it stay Wiz, by the way, it's owned by Google, but don't worry about it. I think that has a lot more potential for them than trying to like rebrand and make it like a GCP native product would do.
Right. I guess I think that there are two things, right? First of all, the premium Google is paying, and then second, we all agree that platforms are important for cybersecurity in general. The question or the challenge, just looking at historically, is how often did similar moves in the industry really deliver good results versus really failing because it didn't work to integrate or to make a better security platform out of potential M&As. So I think that's a question I would like to throw on the table.
I mean, the reality, and sorry, as you're aware as a fellow CISO, security is really tough. The engineering associated with the telemetry that's required today, kind of the real-time, runtime visibility and analysis, these are not inconsequential engineering issues. So I think what's at play is whether or not these platforms have the ability to provide the telemetry to discover risk in as close to real time as possible, and then to be able to affect appropriate changes to whatever that asset is that's at risk. Certainly platforms are probably better positioned because multiple points of telemetry, but being able to handle all that engineering is a very difficult endeavor. It's going to be, to me, the verdict is out on whether or not this is a distraction within Google or not. Most M&A type activity that I've seen hasn't necessarily been as stellar as one would hope.
I think there was also like an indication during the investor call that Wiz might be fully integrated into Google's cloud security offering. Saying that's still speculation what's going to happen, but I don't know, James, if that's something you would include as a potential scenario that there will be a full merge, right, to get to the detail.
I mean, I've been trying to word on the street this a little bit, and I think it's like, I think people would be unhappy if there was any indication at all right now as which way they were going to go in general.
Right.
That's why I said I think like Microsoft's acquisition of GitHub has been one of the few acquisition, like it goes against the acquisition trend, because I think it's very normal that an acquisition happens and then things sort of fall apart and it all like kind of, oh, here's an iframe into the product and it looks like crap and it doesn't actually fit the overall thing. And really it comes down to like, yes, that is the trend. Like if things operate as normal, Wiz will just be some weird dashboard in GCP and it's going to suck and everybody's going to hate it. But there is a chance that this is more of a GitHub kind of move, and Wiz really does get to like lead out this GCP initiative that doesn't like carry the whole brand down with it, but instead, if Google recognizes the potential to like use Wiz to amplify their own security products, the way people still refer to GCP, a lot of it as like Mandiant, because like the brand was so strong. But nobody's talking about like GCP Security Command Center as like the thing that they love to use. So I think it comes down to those details.
Right, and the question is like, if you just remember back when Microsoft bought GitHub, what were the alternatives from other cloud providers to buy the second or third mover? Like, what was the alternative to GitHub back then? I don't think there were a lot of alternatives. Right now, for Microsoft AWS, there are a lot of alternatives. So, question back to I don't know who want to take this, Matt or James. Like, will the empire Microsoft AWS strike back at Wiz customers specifically because they see now that potentially Google and Wiz is going to try to sell GCP? Like, should we expect cloud wars?
James, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I am still so hesitant on the idea that this is a thing people want, like multi-cloud security presented by my cloud security provider. Like Microsoft is willing it into action via their licensing structure, where like I have to pay attention to Microsoft Defender, not because I like want to use it, but because we have it's in our license for the EU, whatever license we're on. And I'm open to the idea that people don't really care about it, but it's not an organic, like if I'm an AWS engineer who has built all of this architecture in AWS, I am not itching for the opportunity to create another cloud provider account to manage my security in this other platform. Yeah.
Yeah, I could not. I wholeheartedly agree. I could not agree more. The technical burden of trying to administer multiple clouds and doing that well at scale is very significant, and it's probably only available for all but the very largest of companies to go into. I think you have folks that have made decisions in these environments. You know, they're all in on AWS. That's where they kind of cut their teeth. They've got their knuckles bloodied. They know how AWS works. You've got kind of the enterprise agreements and everything that Microsoft has
Right.
done to grow Azure. And then I think you've got GCP, which does offer some very, very strong capabilities, but it's a distant third in those races. And so I don't really see that multi-cloud strategy as somebody that's been involved in infrastructure and operations and security across it. That level of complexity adds something to it. You know, I don't think, yeah, just as simple as that. I think at the end of the day, what you will find is people will put their workloads where they want them to be for the underlying infrastructure and the engineering associated with it. And then they will end up selecting the security tools and capabilities that they need to secure the workload in that operating context. That would be my take.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
I
right.
totally agree.
Okay, and then there's still an open question around the backend itself. So typically, if you would acquire a company and then you see that they're using products of a competitor, that's obviously as well a question. We'll not find out in the next days, but perhaps in the next months. Are there going to be a big transitions from, you know, with backend from AWS to GCP, you know, which is obviously going as well to be associated with costs and with other aspects. I think all that is not very clear, but what I've heard as well a lot from the market is a lot of people were hoping that this is going to go public to build the next big platform, security platform along Palo and CrowdStrike. And I think this is now a bit, you know, unrealistic scenario. Obviously, this is not an unrealistic scenario. This is not going to happen. But perhaps we can move a bit now to the other perspective and talk a bit about the industry as such, because, you know, I'm working for a cloud security company, and there are a lot of our other cloud security companies in general addressing the field from different perspectives. But first of all, Matt, perhaps to you as an analyst, being at Gartner so many years, what does this merger and acquisition signals really in terms of strategic value for cloud security? Also considering this valuation, right? Just looking 5 years ago now, where we are.
I think without a shadow of a doubt, there's a recognition in the marketplace within capital markets, et cetera, that this is where the action is. You know, this is where valuations are high. And it's a reflection, not just in terms of cloud security, but it's a reflection that enterprises run and operate in the cloud, that applications, which are really kind of the lifeblood of an organization, are typically not deployed on premise. They're using kind of cloud native capabilities. Again, more than likely in one or two of the major providers. But I think this is where you're going to see things is the organizations and how they look at where they derive enterprise value. It's from that application, and that application has to be secure. It has to be able to leverage some of the native capabilities within that platform to their best and brightest, and ideally present something that is secure, high assurance to that end user customer, whether that's another enterprise or a consumer. So I think there's recognition that enterprise value is in the cloud, and then accordingly, that's really where all the security focus really should be.
All right. So the future of security will be in the cloud, and I think
Yes.
it's just interesting to see that if I see this correctly, it was even the largest transaction from a private equity point of view or venture capital point of view, you know, in history, across other domains as well. James, perhaps just moving over to you from what Matt just said, you've been a big advocate in general for cloud security, obviously, but coming more from a different perspective, being an engineer for Kubernetes in the past, and really looking at how to secure Kubernetes from a prevention point of view, from a detection point of view, rather than focusing on the posture side. So you've been an advocate for runtime security, but I would, you know, call it out in the way that it didn't really progress as a main domain in cloud security in the last years. CISOs went for the easy button, in the way that they would try to understand, first of all, the posture management of the cloud security, and then try to to work based on that. I think this is where we saw the big growth as well in the last 3 to 4 years. So how would you know, how did this merger and acquisition change your view? And where do you expect now cloud security to move next? What are the different perspectives you see right now?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's really interesting because I generally separate like the state of cloud and application security into like posture stuff, which for infrastructure turns into guardrails in the code level. And then there's
Hmm.
like the posture stuff that's for this in between where like a lot of organizations don't have everything defined as infrastructure as code, don't have strong guardrails. And for them, there's this sort of like CSPM, like, oh, I guess I should configure my EBS volumes to be encrypted, like go talk to the development team. And it was this weird middle ground. And then you had like the runtime protection, which is like, I need to stop active threats in my cloud environment. And it was just perceived. I mean, I remember going back many years doing a compliance report where I said, oh, I don't need runtime protection on Linux because it's not attacked. I
Right.
don't think that would fly today, but I think many CISOs, we sort of say like, I don't really understand how attacks like that work, and I haven't seen a lot of them, and so like they're probably not a big deal. And I think over time we've seen more of these cloud attacks that pivot between layers of infrastructure. And you can have all the posture scans in the world, but they're not going to tell you like, hey, guess what? Like you got breached. That's why like these footholds from attackers can last for so long in cloud environments, is because like
Right.
their tools fundamentally have like zero visibility into them. And so I think the Wiz's domination was because it turned out most of the market wanted that middle thing, because they were still figuring out how the configuration worked and they were still figuring out how the runtime worked. And now with like the introduction of Wiz Code to try to answer some of the code people like on the ASPM side, and then Wiz Defend to try to answer some of the runtime advancements on that side, like that my overall position with this acquisition and everything is that fundamentally those are going to be the two pieces of the product that don't um innovate as much as they would have to really complete that vision, because they were sort of like half finished, like they were in flight. Like that was the potential of Wiz, was what if they
Right.
dominate that whole landscape? Like then it's going to be really scary, and that's the high valuation. But I feel like with this acquisition, there's no way, unless they prove every history of M&A wrong, that you're going to see like crazy innovations still happening on those sides. And I think more and more people are finally moving to those sides. But the asterisk I need to put on that is a lot of vendors ignored that middle part because Wiz had like so thought in the minds of so many practitioners had just like won that category. And so I don't know if there's going to be a little bit more interest in that now that they're perceived as like not as much a part of the like competitive fight. If people are going to still care about that as much, or if people really have moved on to these other areas of concern.
I guess there's a lot to unpack, but totally agree with your perspective. So first of all, perhaps we should explain the runtime security to our listeners. If you are not in the position, I always try to describe these two perspectives, right? If you're in a position to fix all of your vulnerabilities in the pipeline while the code is being developed, and really assume that all of your code is secure, then you're fine, but actually not to protect your production environment. But if you have to assume breach because you have some, third-party applications running or certain third-party code running in your production, then you have to assume basically that something is going to happen, and you have to protect the Kubernetes cluster itself and all the different agents, which can get visibility as well in what's happening there. And we just saw during the weekend as well with GitHub Actions, one of those incidents where you would not be able to detect that, during your pipeline, doing your development. It just appeared to happen. And then the question is, how do you encounter for that? So I think there's a value in understanding as well how this threat landscape is changing. And there's definitely this big focus right now on supply chain security, just because these attacks continue to happen. We saw this with executils. And that's going to be very interesting to see how quickly the adoption is going to happen here. I have to say that just looking, for instance, at the open source community and Falco specific, again, just throwing this in, we have more than 60% of Fortune 500 customers using Falco already for more or less detection, but not really upscaling this from a prevention point of view. And I think this is something where we will, as the threat landscape is going to change, potentially see more value going forward and more investments. But then perhaps going back as well to from an industry perspective, and this trend as well, towards runtime. What is now happening on the customer side? What would you do as a CISO? Matt, back to you. What would you be thinking about if you are now AWS Azure and with customer at the same time? Like, what would be a playbook?
Yeah, I mean, at a higher level, just at the abstraction level, our role is paid to be paranoid, and we have to be thinking about what adversaries and threat actors are doing in the timescales that they're operating. And from my view, it's kind of one of the things that I noted in the CISO desk reference guide is effectively, what is it that I don't see that I should see? Why don't I see it? Which is fundamentally a question of telemetry. So I think one of the most critical things for any CISO when he or she is looking over their cloud architecture, looking over the various cloud services, the applications and the sources of enterprise value that are running for that company, is uber focused on that telemetry. And it's not just the existence or the occurrence of the telemetry. We see this with SIMs that are falling over because of how slow they are. They're just not architected to provide kind of that real-time runtime type of insights. It's the timescales that I think are really critical. Would we see something occur at machine or cloud speed? And would our teams be enabled to take whatever the appropriate course of action is to minimize that type of risk? When I read the benchmark, kind of the 555 benchmark, my gut reaction was really challenged. Our IR programs are not operating at the timescales that the adversaries are. And there's still too much work that's being done manually. There's still gaps in telemetry that I think really kind of put us in jeopardy. So I think from a CISO perspective, you're trying to think forward. What will adversaries do? How are they going to exploit services? How are they going to exploit services that might only, literally be up and running for a matter of a minute or so before being torn down? So kind of that ephemeral, very dynamic, very fast-paced environment. What do I need to do to make sure I've got telemetry to see that? That's first and foremost how I would be looking at it.
And I guess the approaches are all completely different to what's happening, what was happening this first and second generation of cloud security, where we were looking at posture, because now it's not just, taking all of these misconfigurations and events and sending this back to developers to fix them. It's now the SOC, which is typically coming into the game,
Yeah.
which is trying to understand what is really happening, trying to reconstruct the events. But then also, as you're saying, there are multiple challenges with the way how quickly can you get even the information out of the Kubernetes stack or out of the containers, out of the cloud environment, and how quickly can you react? Because we just performed also a cloud analysis of our customers and an open source environment, and saw that more than 60% of containers are living less than 1 minute.
Yeah.
So your traditional approaches are not going to work, where you spend a couple of hours just to correlate everything and then to respond to the incident because the container might be gone already.
Mhm.
And you still want to even analyze this container. You still have time to that. So I think there are a lot of new questions as well. But in terms of this merger, just bringing the topic a bit back, like what would you do as a customer? And James, perhaps back to you as well. You've been also in the past a customer of many security solutions. What would be your playbook?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any reason to like take drastic action based on like the hypothetical merger as much as it would like benefit all the other vendors for that. But
Right.
I do think like the things that I'm already thinking about are just accelerated as far as like uh I think people use tools like Wiz to get visibility and vulnerability management done in the cloud. And the questions that leaves open have been, do I want to expand into Wiz Defend or not? I think that's a live question for a lot of people. Or do I want to get someone who's more focused on the runtime? And then same
Mhm.
with Wiz Code. Like, do I want to like move from my existing like sneak checkmarks kind of ASPM thing into Wiz Code? Or do I want to look for a different ASPM solution. I think that's why I continue to emphasize that like this really affects those two sides of the coin much more than like, I don't think a lot of organizations are going to be heavily incentivized by this to be like, wow, I need to rethink my
Yeah.
CSPM vol management tool of choice. Because just nothing's happened yet on that side.
Right. Of course, and how quickly can we change as well, right? But on the other hand, because cybersecurity is always evolving, the question is just to which degree do you change the strategy right now? And the big question from what I've heard, just looking at Reddit as well, from what I've read, is you see simply this multi-cloud discussion happening right now. To which degree are we going to have like going forward the security being focused only on Google Cloud versus other clouds? And I think we've discussed this a bit at the beginning. And obviously the one example we're having was Microsoft, where my question would be how many GCP and AWS customers do you know who are using the Microsoft Compliance Center to secure their environments, right? So it's a big investment. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's a big investment you have to undertake to secure your own cloud, but then also the clouds of other environments, and still maintain this neutrality, what we've discussed at the beginning. So that's a big open question.
I think the egos behind these big three players, as well as Oracle, and to a lesser extent some of the others that are out there, cannot be underestimated. We are now Google, we own this. This will become a feature. We're Microsoft, we own this. This will become a feature or a capability, things of that nature. I think that still remains kind of front and center in that calculus of looking whether or not this is a ubiquitous move or now a specific vendor move. My gut would kind of err on the side of it's a specific vendor move, that it gets subsumed into GCP and becomes a set of features and capabilities that they bring into the platform. It may no longer be kind of front and center from a market perspective, but just more a capability.
To which degree would you feel this is, in general, vendor lock-in? Does it feel like that already, or would you say it's? And James, I think you've started to comment on that a bit a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah, James, do you want to go first, sir?
Sure. I mean, it's I would generally feel the same way if I didn't have like people seem earnestly convinced that Wiz really stands out enough to Google and that this isn't just like another acquisition for them. And I think assuming they do the smartest thing, which is always a giant bet for any mega corporation to do the smartest thing, they have a real opportunity here if they kind of let Wiz flourish as a separate brand identity. That it would require them looking at the numbers on their existing security business and saying, it doesn't seem like this is working. We need to like go all in with this other thing instead. But to your point around egos, like there's a reason that that's the minority of what happens with acquisitions. So.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah. I think what's interesting is we're all in this space, and this is all we see day in, day out. Wiz as a brand, Wiz as a name, if you will. I mean, it's got maybe a standard deviation or two to the left or to the right of where your focus is. But once you're out kind of away from this space, no one really thinks of Wiz as a brand the way somebody would think of, like Google as a standalone brand, or Amazon or Coca-Cola, things of that nature. So I'm always kind of skeptical about the value of a brand in the security space. I think what's most critical from a CISO perspective is just the efficacy of the tools. Is it allowing us to address risk that is meaningful to our organization in a cost-effective, operationally efficient manner? And if it's doing that, the logo, the brand tends to be less important than the outcome of, I've got higher assurance, I've got, less risk of having to deal with something, or explain something to the board of directors after. So.
I think that's a really great point. And I'm trying always to describe it in the way that in cybersecurity, it's not just about now, it's about the future as well, because we are fighting a dynamic threat landscape And if you're not in the position just to be prepared for tomorrow, it's going to be a problem. So a lot of solutions are very effective today, but we have to fight this, let me call it like security entropy, where
Yes.
the effectiveness of controls is just depreciating over time. So you have continuously to invest in innovating those controls to make sure that you can keep up as well with the new threats out there. And I think that's the danger, that if certain M&As are happening, or security companies are not investing in R&D, that controls are becoming ineffective, and therefore I think it can work out even with big companies that this is being a priority, but it's different than to many other companies, right? And the risk is, in cybersecurity, you can't really measure the effectiveness of a control. If you have an HR tool or CRM tool, you can experience this right now, and you can experience the quality of that. In cybersecurity, you often don't do that because it's very hard to simulate all the different attacks. It's very hard to simulate and to keep up as well with this attack. So the power of innovation is a very important topic. Any final comments before we end up? I think we're already over time.
Just briefly,
Otherwise,
I think the innovation by the threat actors that are out there, whether they're nation state or kind of financially motivated, we have to be cognizant of that. Day in and day out, there are novel techniques that threat research teams are discovering that are there to kind of exploit infrastructure, exploit even how we look at things, business logic compromises, all those sorts of things. And to your point, if we're not uber focused about thinking about where things will be 6 months from now, 9 months from now, a year from now, we'll be caught flat-footed. And, from a CISO perspective, that's the last thing you ever want to have happen is, why didn't we think about this when we should have? It should have been reasonably anticipated.
Right. There's, I think, a question coming in. How does acquisition influence Alto Sysdig relationship with GCP? Look, I think at Sysdig we're very partner focused in general, as many companies out there. So we keep investing in these partnerships. We're investing in all the different cloud providers, and I think we're going to be at the Google next. So see us there. It's cybersecurity is a team sport, and therefore I don't think it's about really breaking relationships, but really trying to understand how we work together and what the impact is going to be.
I feel like, to your point, there are plenty of examples of CNAPP providers who sometimes do open partnerships because of the reality that different CNAPPs focus on different things, and so it's as competitive as you feel like making it a lot of the times. Yeah,
exactly. Hey, that was a really great discussion. So I think my takeaways, and obviously I'm a bit biased because I'm working for a cloud security company, but yeah, for Google, it's not just about the security; it's also about the market share. From what I've heard, right? There's a huge market validation, which creates now a huge opportunity for cloud security companies, but also the cloud security space in general, which is also evolving, from just posture towards real-time security, runtime security, something similar we saw as well in the endpoint security networking space happening over the last decades. And I think for companies itself, from what I'm hearing, we have to monitor now closely what's going to happen with this integration, reassess potentially multi-cloud strategies, and just understand how to prepare not just for today, but for tomorrow. So it's going to be a very dynamic environment. And again, cybersecurity is a team sport, and therefore, I think we are all on the same boat. With this, James, Matt, thank you very much. And really looking forward to see what's going to happen. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.